And we're back.
Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
Param, can I just say, holy hell, Param, what the hell?
Yeah, well, I just figured that I needed to do myself up right, since we have a very special guest who's here to talk about...
where's your hat?
I kind of lost it on the way down.
Oh. See, I almost didn't recognize you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know that, like, very few people see what's under the hat, and this totally just, like, you kind of want to keep some of this stuff hidden. Male pattern baldness is bad enough. Male pattern horns...
At least there's a pattern to the horns. I hate asymmetrical horns.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get things completely off. I was very particular in my contract.
I don't know what everyone else heard, but that sounded like infernal for a second there.
Oh, well, that's not great. Also, it looks like I've got 0 kilobits per second on the stream. You all can still hear me, but Twitch is kind of died. Okay, it looks like we might be back. We might be back. Okay, let's take that from the top.
Oh, but that was such good banter.
It is. I'm sorry. I'll try to... Maybe I can edit some of this out. Okay, just give me about 5 seconds of silence. Okay, back to the episode.
Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
Param, you're looking perfectly normal today.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you know, I tried to look my best for every episode of the podcast. Shaved, showered, got my hair done just right.
Freshly polished horns?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to polish the horns. Most people think that you can do the horns en natural, but I don't wake up out of bed just like this. There's a lot of work that goes on before every single episode.
I've always appreciated your hellscaping.
Yeah. But, of course, I don't make myself look this special for any occasion.
No, we have a, I'm going to say this, prolific freelancer joining us tonight. Freelancers maybe are the unsung heroes of the Pathfinder role-playing game and the Pathfinder campaign setting. They've contributed to, well, like, freelancers in general have contributed to every aspect of Pathfinder that's out there. But our freelancer tonight has been contributing to Pathfinder for as long as there's been a Pathfinder. His first credit is in the Pathfinder campaign setting, the 3.5 edition of it. And so he continues to contribute it now, with his latest release being the Book of the Damned. We are proud to have on the show tonight Mr. Todd Stewart.
Hello. Thank you very much.
How are you doing, Todd?
I'm doing quite well, thank you.
Excellent. So I think we need to get this out of the way right now. People might be surprised that you are not a lady tiefling.
Yeah, there is that. Alas.
So
either that I am not a lady tiefling or a lady Yugoloth.
I'm sorry.
I wear
Was
a lot
that insensitive of me? Did I use an outdated term?
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
Now, I mean, if this is a problem, I can talk to my broker and he can hook you up.
Can you just let people in on the joke, Todd? Why would people more associate you with these characters rather than your own face?
So on Facebook, for probably about the last 2 years, I've been using some iteration of the Tiefling / Gonzi / chaotic who's what's it character that I ran through Rise of the Rune Lords, Elsetsio Wyrmtouched, who is gotten to be rather known for me, just for my using her face on Facebook, and then on like half the D&D and Pathfinder message boards on the internet, I'm some iteration of Shemeshka the Marauder, and using images of that, you know, Arcanoloth from 2nd Ed Planescape. So I think I've once, about a decade ago, used my actual face on anything. So people probably have no idea who I am just from me being here.
Actually, funny enough, I went to high school with the Todd Stewart, and you two look a lot alike. I may have added you originally thinking you were him.
Damn.
I'm sorry. Did you think you were an original?
Now, this is a good time to interrupt and say that we are filming this episode of No Direction live on Twitch. And we have a live Twitch audience, a rather lively live Twitch audience. So, to our live audience, if you have any questions for Todd here about his many prolific freelancing achievements, ask them away. We will take questions from the audience throughout the episode and then relay them to our guests here and answer them to the best of our ability.
We've actually had a question since before the interview even started, and that is from Jacob Blackman, asking when you will be starting the Ilsetsia. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I've only heard it's pronounced once. The webcomic, and will you pay him to draw it?
If I had the money, yes, that'd be something that would be totally cool to see. Unfortunately, given what I've written in character from said character, we could probably not feature it on the show here because it gets a bit ribald. Nothing completely over the line, but it does not take itself seriously. But yeah, God knows I have enough art of that character. Honestly, that is my weakness as a freelancer, is completely blowing most of what I get from writing into getting artwork of characters that I'm playing or I'm using in a campaign that I'm running. So thank you, Paizo, and every other company I've worked for being an enabler.
Speaking of Paizo, speaking of companies you've worked for, I want to start talking about Pathfinder Campaign Setting, the 3.5 edition of it, because I had no idea that your credits went back that far. And I'm always curious, how did you get like a reputation with Paizo? How did you get on board that particular project?
So I started working with Paizo when they were still doing Dragon and Dungeon magazine. I ended up getting in on that after having a number of things in their slush pile for a while. And I forgot who it was, but somebody gave just a little nod of the hat and something they wrote for Dragon magazine on something from Planescape in 2nd Ed D&D, using something that was in my Planescape story hour, which is something that I've been writing for over 10 years now on EN World. It's, the last I checked, it's about 2,500 pages in a Word document.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm maybe a little over 60% of the way done with the original campaign being put into story format. But I emailed them, said that was really cool, and they were like, hey, why haven't you written anything for us? And I ended up writing something for them shortly thereafter. I think my first publication in Dragon was The Gate Town of Ecstasy. Although it might have been the article on the ecology of the keepers. One of them was written first, but whichever one I wrote first was actually published later. But then after that, when the two magazines folded, I think I went up to Wesley Schneider at Gen Con the next year when they were talking about this Pathfinder thing that they just started. And I think his comments were something along the lines of, why the hell haven't you written something for us yet? And shortly thereafter, I got sent some early material to read over, and I got some stuff in the campaign setting. I think I did all of the material on the planes, and the section on mundane animals in the very back, and one other part, I think, but I don't quite recall what it was because it's been a while. And then it just kind of went off from there, with not a small bit of me begging routinely for certain topics, which, in my experience, has tended to work. It may take a little while, but eventually, if you pester people enough or send them a bottle of scotch and 2 pounds of pixie sticks, which I did at one point, you will, in fact, get to write stuff that you keep asking for. So, bribery can get you somewhere.
Now, what's this brand of pixie sticks?
What's the vintage?
I have no idea what the pixie sticks were because they came off of Amazon. The scotch was a 10-year, either a 10 or 15-year Lafroig.
Anyway, I've got a minor personal connection to that, but it's more complicated to explain than it is to dismiss. So we're going to move on. You were saying that you were specifically requesting certain freelance projects. What was it? What's your wheelhouse? What was your most interested? But what was your area of interest? Sorry.
The planes. The Great Beyond, the 3.5 planar book, which they just announced that they're going to be doing a Pathfinder hardcover, Planar Adventures, which you guys broke at Gen Con, and I saw several people online going, "Oh my God, I can finally talk about this." Well, they haven't officially announced any authors yet, so nobody should talk about it if they can avoid it. But then I think the one that I begged for most was the original Book of the Damned 3, Horsemen of the Apocalypse, because, darn it, if I can't write a Fiendish Codex 3 on the Yugoloths, which nobody ever wrote, let me do the Pathfinder version, which honestly I've done a whole heck of a lot more than anything for, the D&D Loths.
That's probably one of my favorite softcover Pathfinder books ever published. So, great job!
Thank you.
Yeah, if you've never heard Perrin's review of it, I will send you a link because it is an impassioned review, and it got me to pick up the book. Was that
the one that you talked about, and you said it was really good to the point that you never ever want to read it again because it was that bleak?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
It is incredibly serious. Plus, I kind of want to run a campaign there now because it was so well. The whole imagery of the terribleness that is Abaddon was so well done, and the inhabitants put together so creepily that I was like, this needs to be its own campaign. Just playing some 6 unfortunate souls, in the rather literal sense of 6 unfortunate souls, vying for survival in this terrible, terrible place.
I had a lot of leeway in that one. I mean, depending on the project, your outlines can be absolutely, totally strict, as in this paragraph write this next paragraph write this, 100 words on this, 500 words on this. As I recall in that one, like one of the chapters was, 10,000 words, make some harbingers.
Nice.
And, or, just completely open-ended on a number of topics. So I very much enjoyed that one.
So how do you approach it when you're given an open-ended assignment like that?
Panic.
Oh, great.
I don't know. Because I usually only end up doing about, I think I average maybe like 2 projects a year. Just because I've gotten into a very niche topic. And as Paizo has had more and more freelancers come into the fold, whether it be through RPG Superstar or writing Pathfinder scenarios for the Society, they have a lot of extremely talented people. And they can genuinely afford to have people only do what they think they're really good at. I'm not necessarily complaining about this because of my job's time constraints since I've started writing, I haven't needed to write to pay the bills, but I don't really have the time to do more than just 1 or 2 projects. So I've never had a project I did not feel impassioned about writing. So
nice.
Such a problem to have.
And it's also, like, you've got a niche, but it's a niche that Paizo loves, and it's a niche that Paizo loves going back to.
I'm really glad they like it.
So, Book of the Damned, the hardcover, collects the first 3 Book of the Damned, but it's also got a fair amount of original content. So, you are one of the authors that's kind of credited as a major contributor to it. So, what did you, besides the reprinted content, what kind of original content did you provide?
There's some expanded material on each of the 4 horsemen. There is for the first time, a full description and obediences and boons for all of the Daemonic Harbingers. In the original, there was only, I think, 3 of them got any real detail. I think Varasha, Pavnuri, and one other one, unless That was the one that got cut. But this time around, they all get some detail. Their realms get description. They get some physical description for them as well. Some of them more than others, but they all do get fully fleshed out. In the original Book of the Damned, there was just a chart at the very back. I cannot claim credit for all of them. I think I did maybe a little under a third of them because that was a late addition to the product. I did not create some of the most hideously twisted ones. I'm sure I get blamed for them. And after fleshing them out in the hardcover now, I suppose I can. But it just adds a lot more detail to what was there originally. Also, there's details on the Sakheels for the first time. A lot of the other smaller fiendish races that have been introduced since the planes were first fleshed out in the Great Beyond. I mean, in that original book, we didn't have psychopomps. And in fact, it was just sort of an open question of, we'll figure out what to put as far as true neutral outsiders in the first case. So I deliberately danced around detailing anything because we didn't know what the hell we were going to do. What ended up being there was spectacular. I think Wes was responsible for them, and they're just really cool.
So I noticed you've been saying "we" a lot on the projects, and a lot of the times when we talk to freelancers, there seems like there's a greater separation between Paizo and their work, but it really does feel like you've got a collaborative relationship on the projects that you work on.
At least for the original stuff that I worked on, The Great Beyond, there was a decent amount of back and forth between me and some of the guys at Paizo because they were still in the process of fleshing out exactly how their planar structure was going to be. Like originally for the planar structure that was introduced in the 3.5 campaign setting, I think originally we had maybe half of the planes with names, the other half just being in alignment, and think of something good and bounce it off of us and we'll see if we go with it. So I got to do a lot of that initial on-the-ground design work. The original onion-shaped structure was set by Paizo, but maybe half of the outsiders were just up in the air as for what they would be, and I got a chance to do my own thing with them. Not all of what I originally came up with was what we went with, but everything ended up being really, really cool, and I'm happy to have contributed what bits that I did.
Now, one of the impressions I'm getting from the impression that the book has left is that even though there were 2 books that came out this year that were hardcovers that contained a lot of reprints from the softcover books, no one minded that with Book of the Damned. People seemed to like that things were going to be more codified, fleshed out, and that everything was going to feel like a legitimate option. Yeah. Is that how it felt from your point of view working on it?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with taking the Boons and Obediences, which first popped up in the demonic Book of the Damned, but we got to expand that out not only to devils and daemons, but also some of the, I hate to say it, but some of the third wheel races that were introduced after the fact, and those newer races like the Asura Ranas and the Fallen Psychopomps, the Sakheels. They're brought into the full scope of, okay, where do they fit into the cosmology? Where do they fit in, by comparison to the big 3, for lack of a better term? And they don't feel like, add-ons after the fact. They're, just about a full third of the book on everything new. So it looks really, really nice. Plus, the artwork is spectacular. A lot of things have new artwork. I'm loving all of it. My favorite piece is one of the chapter openers that has all 4 of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse riding their apocalypse steeds, which were introduced in Bestiary 6, which I also got to work on. I did the apocalypse horses therein, and they're illustrated just running rampant through this town on the prime material plane. It's an absolutely gorgeous piece.
Now, I would say that outsiders, you get to be more visual with your descriptions than most other creature types. So, like, what's some of the most fun things that you've seen depicted that just came out of your apparently rather twisted brain?
I would probably go with the Kekatar Protean. That's one of my favorites. I would also go with the Melodamon is also one of my favorites. I want to say
before we go too far. So, what remind people what they look like and what it was like seeing the art for the first time?
The Melodamon originally started out as kind of a nod to Planescape's Arcanoloths, but then promptly became their own creature. The only real thing that they have in common is that they're vaguely jackal-shaped. But imagine a humanoid jackal that's the physical embodiment of starvation, who doesn't really quite have a discrete structure. It's more made up of this loose slurry of blood, bile, and mucus held together by this thin membrane. So they walk in and it immediately smells like vomit and bleach. Real nice visual there. Also, I think the Phasmadaemon, if I'm thinking of the correct one, actually came out of a nightmare that I had while I was working on the book. It kind of vaguely looks like this combination centipede, snake, caiman,
Why?
which is a type of crocodile. Let me see what else. The Proteans are really my babies more than anything else, despite the notoriety that I get for all of the demonic stuff that I've worked on. I've probably written like 90% of the word count for the Proteans. I absolutely adore them. And that was, I think more than anything, we didn't know what the hell we were going to do with the chaotic neutral outsiders, so I got to build them from the ground up because we couldn't use Slotty because they were, intellectual property of Wizards of the Coast. So go with something completely new, and at least in their case, so I went into really obscure mythology there with the Ogdoad of Hermopolis from ancient Egyptian mythology, which had a race of frogs and a race of serpents creating the world out of primordial mud and chaos. And since the Slotty were frogs, let's make a serpentine race and run with that. So it's been a lot of fun. And of course, now that you're asking me about specific outsiders, I'm blanking on them despite having done a ton.
I mean, you're pronouncing more of these names right than I think I have in my lifetime. So you've already got a lot of points above us.
The Seedwinar from the negative energy plane. And I'm pronouncing it differently here than the official pronunciation, which is the Skadenar. But this is what I get for not giving a pronunciation when I do a product turnover.
No.
What have you learned?
You have a product turnover. Because people in my home campaign looked at me weird when I pronounced Tromarixian as Tromarician. So, but I bow to the official answer as to how they're pronounced.
Now, going back to some of the creepy stuff you get blamed for, Alex Agunas from our network had inspired a question. Or really, he just had this question. I'm totally stealing it because it's a great one. When you're designing the Book of the Damned, it's Paizo's most evil book. But there had to have been a line, because we've seen some other books. So what was the line? What was too evil and what was just evil enough?
Nothing was given to us to specifically stipulate, okay, here's a line, don't cross it. But actually, in this book, I ended up writing a disclaimer with my turnover for the first time, stating I've written some really messed up stuff, although I did not use the word messed up. Trying to stick with the content restrictions here for the podcast. But I've written some messed up stuff for you guys. This is well beyond the pale, except it honestly fits the really messed up creature that I'm talking about. And I'm just trying to rationally describe it as it should be in-game, in-world. But if it's crossed a line, let me know. I will rewrite it. And a few things got changed in development. Not a ton. but it did get toned back a little bit. It does ride the line of what is explicitly given and explicitly hideous, but just vacuous enough that you're going to be supplying some of the details yourself. And honestly, I think that's some of the best way to tackle themes in general. Because if you just go out and, write torture porn, that, it has shock value, but it doesn't really have any lasting value, in my opinion. It's just like an 80s slasher fic that, film that doesn't age well. So give somebody this creature in the darkness that's not fully explained, if you can, and let people's imaginations fill in what the more horrific details are going to be, and you will have that much more of an impact on your audience. People will want to use these things rather than just go, oh God, this is hideous and horrible, I don't ever want to work with this again. And if you try to go all hideous, all horrible, all the time, it can come off as almost juvenile, of, a bunch of 8th graders trying to creep each other and gross each other out. Try to have some subtlety, try to have some nuance, and hopefully I did that at some point in this book.
I also want to commend you for including that disclaimer in your turnover. So instead of you being the sole arbiter of what the line should be, you went with whatever you've inspired you, whatever you felt was the ultimate thing, and then you weren't precious with your words. You told them you have total permission because this is a really dark book and we can go in dark places, but it's also a game.
I mean, there's always the understanding of anything that you put into a turnover is subject to change by the developers and editors, and honestly, it's for the best. Because if it's just my set of eyes looking over my stuff, I'm not going to be able to look at it and go, okay, what can be improved, what needs to be changed, what probably doesn't work as well as something else. The more people you have giving some input on that, I think it works out for the better. I'm certainly proud of everything that I've ever gotten into print, even stuff that has been heavily changed, in the process of development. With shared work, world, material, I mean, that's par for the course. It's an understanding.
Also, I'm going to bring up a comment from Critwalker76. He says, okay, compared to Todd, I'm sane. Nice comment. But I just want to say that, as far out and, just off the wall and terrifying as some of your concepts can be, I love that you seem like a pretty down-to-earth fellow. You're someone that if I didn't know what you did, I could have tea with and just relax and feel completely comfortable that you're not, using my face to inspire a horror. Not because I'm terrible, but because you're thinking of things to do to my face that would just, make you a monster. But you're not. Or are you?
Boringly normal.
I like it.
Honestly, I tend to vacillate back and forth between writing stuff for print that's, hideously bleak and dark, and then stuff that is just completely off-the-wall whimsical. And a lot of that latter material I just end up writing for myself. Most of what I've written along those lines has really never seen the internet, except for emails back and forth between, people in a gaming group I'm in. If you ever have me in a game, I tend to write in-game fiction, and a lot of it.
Now, I'm going to take a step away from Book of the Damned, unless Param, do you have more Book of the Damned questions?
No.
Okay, so this is based on a question from the Arcania, is asking him for more adventures and info on the continent of Tian Sha. And I see that you worked on Dragon Kingdom, so what can you tell us about your contribution to the far east of Galarian?
I'm trying to remember what I wrote for the book, because it's been a long time. I wrote that immediately after Book of the Damned 3. James Jacobs talked me into working on it because it was a really big turnover, and I was going to take a break in the immediate aftermath of that. But it was a fun project. I believe I wrote the racial material. I either wrote the racial material for the Somserons or the kingdom that's primarily Somserons. I wrote up the initial race info for the Kitsune.
Ooh.
You've got a fan on the network, then.
I wrote up the Tengu Kingdom. And I may have written up the Aasimar, the heavily Aasimar Kingdom, but I don't want to claim that one because I'm not certain on it. I may just have written up some of the Aasimar. No, I think I did write that, but it's been like 7 years.
And it also feels like this wasn't, like you said that most of the things you've written have been a passion project for you, but this one feels a little bit more like it was mostly an assignment?
It sounded interesting. It wasn't something that I requested. I just wanted to do something that was completely different from Book of the Damned 3 after writing that monster. Because let's face it, there's a certain tone in that book that after you've written, I don't remember the word count, but it was over 50,000 words.
Wow.
You'll want to do something different. I think also in the immediate aftermath of Book of the Damned 3, I wrote a supplement for John Brazier Enterprises on half fairy dragons, which is about as far off field as you can get.
It's a nice palate cleanser.
Yeah.
I forgot some of the weird stuff JBE put out at that time. I mean, good stuff, but man, they did some off-the-wall products.
I did that, and I did a book on Umbral Kobolds for them.
Umbral Kobolds. Cool.
Now, you've got dozens of credits in your freelancing history. What is it like when, like, how do you go? Do you go out fishing for specific assignments to your niche? Do you wait for publishers to come to you? And, like, how do you organize and get started on these projects? I mean, what is your process?
I've rarely done more than 2 projects a year. Usually they've been moderate to large size when I do them. Most of the time I've been begging for a certain topic to land on my plate for years before I end up getting it. So it's rarely a huge surprise. Although I do, pop a cork on something and celebrate when I get something that I've really wanted to work on for a while. Book of the Damned 3 being one example. I think somebody from Paizo straight up told me on the message boards, yes, you'll be working on it. Settle down, Todd. But occasionally, it's something completely out of the blue. But it's a cool enough project that I can't say no. And Paizo is really good with knowing, what sort of stuff works best with their freelancers, unless you're completely new and they're just kind of feeling you out. I've only turned down a project once because I just had way too much on my plate, and I politely had to say no. I'm like, this would be a cool thing to work on, but I can't do it now. Also, I think other people would do it better than I would. There's no shame in that.
No, I'll never work in this town again.
And I think if you can tell somebody no because your mind won't be into it and you won't do as good of a job as somebody else, or you don't have the time to properly do it, and you'll run the risk of not having it done in time. I think it's appreciated when you can man up to that and say, yeah, give it to somebody else, rather than string your developer along.
That Paizo production line just is constantly moving forward, so they really can't afford any aspect of any project to get fouled up. Otherwise, there's ramifications. So that's, again, the mature professional response. I admire you quite a bit. I'm enjoying this conversation, Todd.
Thank you.
I'm now imagining like a whole literal production line with a bunch of like Quibbleff parts on a conveyor belt just being plugged into each other and shipped off.
They've got someone just following along, transcribing your turnovers into the books by hand. In addition to the work you've done for Paizo, you've already mentioned a couple of your third-party publisher credits, but I've always felt that third-party publishers is a great way to really flex, to really like explore your creative ideas. And so how do you find the publisher that fits the ideas you want? What are some of the ideas that you think are better for third-party projects instead of waiting for a Paizo assignment?
I've never intentionally chased out third-party work. I've always had somebody come to me with an idea, and it's always been something that I'm like, that is a really cool idea, and usually it's something that's far enough afield that you wouldn't see a major company like Paizo doing it because it's a little more experimental. For instance, the Ethera project that I worked on that came out recently, that Robert Brooks did, along with a
Robert
really
Brooks?
good...
I'm not familiar. Oh, Bobby Brooks.
Bobby,
That got me in trouble today, right? That got me in
I
trouble
know.
today.
but really, really cool concept. I had a blast with that. Another one was the Fairy Ring from Zombie Sky Press that I had a really fun time working with. And that was more along the whimsical side of things.
Oh,
You have a
goodness.
poltergeist in the room? Or?
You have an extra planar invader. Yeah. Okay. So it's my turn to take over the interview. Now, you've got a microphone and several thousand people listening. If you were to what would be your dream freelance project right now if you could land one? What's the cool? What would you want to work on right now if the sky was the limit?
Two things that I can't really choose between.
Okay.
One of them would be the Big Book of Proteans, in the lines of Book of the Damned, but just strictly covering the Proteans and the Maelstrom and some of the other stuff drifting around there. Mm-hmm. I adore the plane. I adore the critters that I and others have created to fill it in. And I would leap at the chance of doing however many words they would let me print. The other one would be if hell suddenly froze over and Wizards of the Coast not only did a Planescape product, but knew who I was and let me work on it. The closest I got to that was I did a Demonomicon for Shemeshka the Marauder in 4th ed. Which my co-author on that one actually specifically requested that they contact me and ask me to write half of. So
cool.
That's still good. That's a great feather in the cap.
Yeah, it's a good feeling. Mm-hmm. But I haven't written anything for them, since then, and nobody I know over there even works there anymore. So I think the chances of that are very slender, but I would absolutely jump at it. That's one of the sort of things that, and I've told Paizo, here's the topics that if you ever decided to do anything involving this, despite the fact that I just started pharmacy school and have zero time to write anything, I will find time to work on this. There are certain projects that would make me do that, and that's one of them. So.
It's funny that nothing you've listed comes close to pharmaceutical options in Pathfinder.
No.
Really strict division between life and creative work?
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, I've spent the last 10 years as a cell biologist. I'm working on both preclinical drug development and more recently a cell-based therapy for urea cycle disorder. But very strict division between the type of writing that you do in that career field and, fiction that you end up writing for RPGs.
All right. Well, Todd, I think we're about ready to wrap things up. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would really like to go into, something you've got just a killer anecdote about?
Do not do what I did for my first large turnover at as a freelancer ever, which was the great beyond for Paizo in 3.5, because I think I hold the record right now, and I am very sorry about this, and Sean K. Reynolds continually hassles me when he can, deservedly so, because he got to edit that one. My turnover was multiple tens of thousands of words over the word count.
What?
Wow.
Yeah. That was a mistake.
That was a soft cover. There's not multiple tens of thousands of words in that book.
I think he said something along the lines of he was reading through and going, wow, there's some really cool ideas here. And the art director, looking at layout, goes, Sean, we have a big problem.
Well, I mean, obviously that book needed to be 300 pages.
Yeah, I ended up writing most of that while I was on vacation in Florida with a laptop on the beach with a White Russian in my hand. It was a gigantic passion project, and I kind of went a bit overboard. I would suggest nobody in their right mind ever do that, because God knows how the hell I ended up still working in this industry after pulling that stunt.
Wow.
I mean, like, I understand why Paizo says don't go over, that it's like it adds work, it's not bonus words, but you also got to admire just how much you went over. Like, just missing the mark by that much. It shows a passion, and obviously the quality of the words is great. So it's just like one thing that they have to tighten up.
I hold the record in terms of raw word count over. I am not the record holder for being over in terms of percent over compared to the original word count. I'm not going to name names, though, but they know who they are.
This is interesting.
Yeah. Way to end the interview on an intriguing note. More of a tease than a setup. I'm not happy with you anymore, Todd. I was enjoying this, and now you leave me wanting.
Do we need to do a take and cut away here? We will find you.
No. If our listeners can't know, I don't want to know. It's not fair.
All right.
Do I?
Oh. Well, Todd, thank you so much for coming on. Where can our listeners find out more about you, follow your work?
I don't actually have my own personal page.
And why?
Because I've been sitting on artwork that I had made for a page for myself, and I'm sitting on a domain name, but I've never actually gotten up off of my tail and I actually built it. It would have been laughingfiend.com or
good name.
.net. I don't remember which one it was. That one was actually, the name was based on Tegrazin the Laughing Fiend, who appears in a couple Paizo products. The longest was in Classic Treasures Revisited, where he gets a full write-up. He was actually the primary villain of my last home game. And, God, probably the darkest character I've ever written. That's saying something. But I'm on Facebook. I'm on the Paizo forums a lot. Yeah, that's about it. I have a Planescape Story Hour on EN World that I update irregularly when I have the time. It's 2,500 some pages in Word, so it's up there.
Excellent. Well, thank you once again for joining us, Todd.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
For everyone else, we will be right back right after this.
Hang up.
Find the news. Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news.
And we're back.
In the Pathfinder news segment, we talk about all the latest happenings from Paizo and third-party publishers for the Pathfinder role-playing game. And I'm going to give you some credit here, Param, that you set up a new way that we find our stories. And so we've got...
No, industry secret. Don't tell people.
I'm not saying how we do it, just that credit to you. We've got more news than usual, and I'm looking forward to our new, like, Fast and Furious news style.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to have to, because there's a lot of news to talk about this week, in which we didn't know there was going to be a lot of news, except for the one big story. Everybody knows the one big story we're going to talk about.
So the one big story is, of course, that James Sutter, who has been with Paizo for 13 years, and was the creative director. Like, this is a recent promotion. He was the creative director on Starfinder. Now the top-selling product from Paizo, he has left the company.
This completely caught me, well, I was surprised to hear of this so soon after the promotion announcement, especially. He seems to be a perfect fit for that particular assignment. James has been on the show multiple times, both as a coordinator and as author. We had him on the show to promote his books. He's a fantastic author. He's been with the company so long that it's going to be really hard understanding what a Paizo without him was going to be like, much like with Wes or Sean before him. So yeah, this was a big shock.
Yeah, so a lot of the times that he was on the show was to promote Pathfinder Tales, which I don't know if we ever officially said this on the show, but Pathfinder Tales is on hiatus after the Tor deal came to an end. We don't have any specifics about what happened, but Tor will no longer be distributing Pathfinder-published Pathfinder Tales novels.
Right.
And I know it was something that James was passionate about and worked very hard to get off the ground, but I'd imagine that the move over to Starfinder, whatever ended that deal, meant that he didn't have time to focus on that line anymore. And now that he's gone, I'm really curious to see who's going to pick up the Pathfinder fiction ball and run with it. Because he's also co-writing the comic that's currently coming out from Dynamite for Pathfinder, him and Wes, neither of which is with the company anymore.
Right. Now, I doubt that that's going to change much. He did say in his exiting letter, which is available on Paizo if you want to go read it, his last ever blog post, that he is likely to continue to write for Pathfinder and Starfinder for the foreseeable future. And in fact, he might be writing more so because he won't be spending that time managing the brands anymore. So we probably is not the last we will have heard of James.
No, and he got a nice send-off on the blog, the Monday's blog following his goodbye blog, so we know that his relationship with Paizo is still positive. I am sure, like you said, we're going to see more. It's him and Wes leaving so close together, and the joke was often that people would mix the two of them up, so it's just weird that both of them are gone now.
Yeah, there's a lot of shakeup going on over there. I hope that it is healthy. But yeah, it's definitely hard to see this much turnover in major staff in such a short period of time and not worry.
Well, there is one person who doesn't have to worry. He got a nice promotion out of James Sutter leaving, and that is Rob McCreary. So Rob has been with the company for, I believe it's 8 years. He was a quarter finalist of the first RPG Superstar. He might have been top 6. And that was the only year that they did a top 6. Anyway, so shortly after that, not winning RPG Superstar, but getting that far enough in the tournament, he got hired by Paizo and has been working in various creative positions since then. For a while, he was running the other adventure. So not other, but so every year there would be the James Jacob Adventure Path and then the Rob McCreary Adventure Path. So when Starfinder was announced, he was brought over as the person who was in charge of the Starfinder Adventure Path, and he still is. That's his position, and I believe he's far enough in the development of the Adventure Path that even if his new role means that someone else has to take over that, he still led the majority of that first Adventure Path. Dead Sons, it's called?
Yeah, Dead Sons. And there's some advantages there, because right now, with Starfinder, at least with what's been announced, the Adventure Path is coming out at about half the rate of a Paizo Adventure Path, so there's going to be just one 6-issue arc a year. It is a shorter book than the Paizo Adventure Path, too, so there's less pages to fill. But also, and I think that Paizo's, they've tried, but I don't think they've done a great job on the messaging on this to get this out here because of how important it is. But the Adventure Path is the primary outlet for Starfinder content besides the core rulebook. There isn't a player's guide line. There isn't a campaign setting line. And we don't know how that's going to change in the future, especially given how successful Starfinder has proven to be. But as of right now, that is the #1 source for all of the creative side of the output of that. So he was already in charge of the adventure part of that book. This this announcement seems to mostly mean that he's now in charge of 100% of that book.
And it's also a good time in the lifespan of Starfinder to make this switch, because I'm sure James Sutter had a lot of ideas for the long term, long term what would be happening in the Starfinder universe. But as of now, we've only got the one RPG, or the one. Okay, we've got 2 products that have creative content, and one of them, the core rulebook, is a lot more crunch. It's got some world, but a lot of that world is still based on what we knew about Pathfinder, and it's just kind of been modernized and futurized. So we haven't got the purely this is the book that separates Pathfinder from Starfinder yet. And so if it's going to be more of a Rob McCreary product, and he's going to be working on that for who knows how many years he holds this position, Starfinder will still feel like a single a single vision.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it'll still seem, to what extent that it can. I mean, there's hardly a creative hand at Paizo that hasn't touched on this product.
True, and we were just talking about how influential and under the radar freelancers can be. Mm-hmm. So yes, I don't want to say that the creative director is the only person with any kind of creative decision making, but it is an important task, and it is probably the final say on a lot of creative decisions that have to be made along the way. Justin Franklin is asking when Pact World comes out. I'm going to look that up quickly.
March. It's coming out in March. That is going to be the other primary outlet for the creative side of the house. It's the campaign setting book. It was announced at Gen Con. I guess I forgot about that one. But yeah, that is. I don't know how. I guess he will now be taking over a larger role in that book, though of course something coming out in 6 months. With how Paizo works, I'm not exactly sure how much of the development still needs to be done on the book. That's, that might be completely in the bed and over in China right now getting printed for all I know.
6 months, yeah, that's around. Anyway, it's possible he's finishing it off, but I would not be surprised if James Sutter's name was still in the credits as the creative director when that book comes out. Mm-hmm. It is not the only hiring it's not the only change in position at Paizo. Paizo recently hired a new vice president of marketing and licensing. His name is Jim Butler. Mm-hmm. And to RPG fans, he would be best known for his work at Wizards of the Coast, where he was brand manager and licensing director. And his association with tabletop RPGs goes all the way back to TSR, where he was a writer and an editor.
I know his name sounded familiar. I didn't know that it was that familiar.
Well, he's also worked on Rift's Trove Defiance, but those are computer games. I thought that's where you might know him more from, Pam.
Oh, probably just from all the many TSR biographies I have been binging lately.
Nice.
Now, here's the situation there. Starfinder is the first time that Paizo has really put its marketing power forward. It's the first time they seriously tried to market something on a large swath. I mean, they were putting this thing in IGN and Kotaku and Polygon. They were putting this stuff out there in newspapers. They were putting this stuff out there in just about every podcast going, including ours, but that's no special secret. They're always on ours. But they were getting the word out there. They were getting ads out there. They were doing AMAs. They were putting the full force of marketing and public relations ahead, and I think that is a big factor in what made Starfinder so successful, so much more successful than other product launches that they've been a part of. And so I think that success is a strong factor behind choosing to do this hire.
And something that's a little more subtle about Starfinder as a licensing, or the licensing potential of Starfinder versus Pathfinder, is that Pathfinder is a word that's out there. There is a Viking movie called Pathfinder. There's a very well-known SUV called the Pathfinder. Mm-hmm. In fact, outside of the gaming realm, if you say Pathfinder, people are going to think you're talking about a car.
I need to also add that my school a couple of years ago added a mascot, which is an anthropomorphic fox named Pathfinder. This has made my job very complicated.
There's a G.I. Joe named Pathfinder. But there's no G.I. Joe named Starfinder, because Starfinder is a brand new name. It's a brand new brand.
Almost.
All right, get into that.
Okay, so there was this other sci-fi RPG coming out that was kind of an indie thing called Starfinder at the time, and Paizo kind of crushed it. Now, they worked very nicely with those people after the fact and made amends, but oops. It's like, man, that had to hurt being the little guy in that situation.
Yeah, but the little guy was also flying pretty close to the sun, because you had to know if Pathfinder was going to expand, it was either going to be Path something or something Finder.
Yeah. But hey, yeah, that happened. I mean, it's been over a year now since that happened, so it's kind of hard to remember the details. But it was almost completely original.
And actually, I want to ask a question to our listeners, and you can post this in chat or on our Facebook page. Is Jim Butler the kind of guest you would like us to pursue? Because first of all, I don't know if he would be interested in coming on the show, because he has a lot of, well, it's trade secrets. It's a lot of very sensitive things that we would be talking about, so he might just not be an option. But were he an option, I know I would love to talk to him about this. And like, marketing and licensing is a passion of mine, and I would love to get into his head, pick his brain. Is that someone the listeners would be interested in?
Yeah, so, exactly how inside baseball do you guys want this show to be?
Yeah, you will not know how to make a better fighter, but you might know how to market a fighter as a breakfast cereal.
Oh, no, man. I love me my Valeros. Yeah. So I'm glad they made the hire. Welcome aboard. We will hope to be talking to you soon.
Param.
Yes.
What can you tell me about legacy race boons?
Well, I think... Well, before we talk about what I can tell you about legacy race boons, I think that there's another big news item that we should address that's inside the network.
Go on.
Well, last week, some of our listeners may have very well downloaded an episode of No Direction without you in it and wondered what in the world was going on. Well, for a very long time, imagine me and Ryan in a corner having a space boxing match. Well, not really. This is actually much more amicable than that. But the decision had to be laser boxing match. We didn't know what we were going to do with Starfinder coming forward. This is not the first time we've been faced with such a decision. We had Pathfinder Online, we had the Pathfinder card game, and we need to decide anytime that Paizo branches out, how much of that is going to stay core to the main flagship show, No Direction, and how much of that do we need to splinter off. It looked like, and I think a big part of the decision making was that I was incredibly into Starfinder, and your interest has yet to be solidified.
No, I'm totally happy Starfinder's there. I'm happy a lot of people are playing Starfinder, but ultimately at this point in my life, I am boxing up my 3.5 books and considering selling them, and I'm the guy that started 3.5 Private Sanctuary. So the idea that I'm selling my 3.5 D&D books, I'm not going to then start a new game. I don't want to have more RPG material that's sitting on my shelf not being played. It's nothing against Starfinder. It's definitely not a moral stance, but it was just like, I have the core rulebook, and I will play some Starfinder Society when I get that opportunity, but I won't be going out of my way to play Starfinder Society, and I definitely don't see myself fitting a campaign in the near future. In fact, as I mentioned in our chat, if I had the time in my life for more than one RPG campaign, it would be 2 Pathfinder Adventure Paths. And if I had time for 3, it would probably be 3 Pathfinder Adventure Paths. It's only if I ever had time for a 4th that I would really start looking at Starfinder. And again, it's not a slight on Starfinder, it's that I like Pathfinder. I don't know if people realize this. I'm a big fan.
So we were faced with the reality that if we were to incorporate Starfinder into the main show, it would be a whole lot of Jay talks for a half an hour about something important going on with Starfinder, and Ryan nods.
Jay?
Oh, sorry. Param talks for half an hour, and Jay still stays retired from the show. And then Ryan just nods politely and asks questions without any first-hand experience, or at least not a comparable amount. So what I did is I gathered 2 of our most enthusiastic Starfinder members of the network, one of whom wrote on the parts of the book, very tiny parts, but one of whom had some writing on the books, and then James Ballard, who is primarily known to our audience as the author of our Code Switch blogs, which are very good. You should totally go read the Code Switch blogs if you haven't. An entirely great sense of different perspectives on the gaming industry. And frequent guest of 3.5 Private Sanctuary, to join me in a regular Starfinder dedicated Splinter show called No Direction Beyond, which will be airing offset from the regular No Direction flagship show, basically from here on until now. The exact schedule is still flux because we've got 3 people starting a new podcast. We need to find out what date and time works best for us and the audience and the guests. But right now it seems to be hitting the Tuesdays that No Direction isn't. So if No Direction is airing on a Wednesday, the next Tuesday seems to be when No Direction Beyond is airing. Though that's likely to change. So we'll be continuing to make announcements well in advance of the episodes, so that those of you wishing to catch us live can join us. We have our pilot episode already out where we reviewed the Starfinder core rulebook. It was a enthusiastic and energetic episode in which we had all 3 of us reviewing the book, including Alex, which we had to very, very, very boldly claim: do not listen to anything he says. He is biased, and this is automatically assumed to be horrible biased lies. Any word out of his mouth with the rulebook. Now, I think it was a fun episode. It seems to be very well received. Many thousands of you have watched it. Thank you. Or listened to it. We definitely had a noticeable bump in audience for that show. So for those of you who are new to the network and have come to us because of No Direction Beyond, welcome. We do this, twice a week.
And I think we're going to try and be extremely clear when we're posting events, whether it's going to be No Direction or No Direction Beyond.
Right.
But like the rule of thumb, at least going forward, is that if it's any night other than a Wednesday, it's probably Beyond.
Yeah. Now, No Direction Beyond is going to be the Starfinder News Reviews and Reviews podcast. What you see here is what you're going to see over there. It probably will also include some of the stuff you traditionally see from Private Sanctuary when it applies to Starfinder instead of Pathfinder, because, well, first, there's not as much Starfinder coming out, so there needs to be some more content. And secondly, we just don't have a comfortable space for that material either. And we happen to have the crew that would have done that anyway. So no use splitting the show. No Direction Prime, or we haven't decided to change the network name yet of the flagship show. But as far as No Direction, will still be the Pathfinder News Reviews and Reviews podcast. Any major news, regardless of source, as long as it's Paizo News, we'll at least mention on this show, because that's what we do for every Splinter everything. Card game, online game, comic book, whatever. But if there's any major Starfinder news, you'll expect a mention of it here, and then an in-depth discussion on the following No Direction Beyond with the rest of the crew.
Yeah, but what we're going to do is it's never just going to be the same content twice. So if it's mentioned here, like you said, it'll be in-depth there. Mm-hmm. Or if it's something we really go into, like let's say we do have this theoretical interview with Jim Butler, and he goes into marketing Starfinder specifically and how it's separate from Pathfinder. You might then summarize it and tell people to come check out this episode of No Direction for more information.
Right.
Because that's also something I don't like. I don't like completely overlapping content. Yeah, I don't even, when we tweet, I make sure it's not the exact same wording as our Facebook posts.
Any overlap there will just be the new perspectives of the other members of the co-host. I won't repeat myself twice. I don't like doing it. All right. So speaking of news that we're going to go over briefly here and then go over in more depth later, because that'll mean more on the other show. There has been an announcement finally for how the rewards program is going to work for Starfinder. For those of you who don't know, the Starfinder races are completely different than the Pathfinder races, with the exception of human, because human is in everything.
Humans. Getting in everything.
You think they deserve everything. Now, but the book does have, in the back chapter, rules for playing the rest of the Pathfinder races, because, of course, you want to play Space Dwarves, or that's something that's a lot of people are going to want to do. And they realize that a lot of people are going to want to play those races in society. But they don't want it to be, they want the new races to really shine. So they have to balance here. So how do you get yourself permission to play a laser dwarf? You play.
I don't know, Param.
You
How?
You will in the regional support program. You will show up for a game day that has a venture officer running it, and that has the regional support by going through a lot of paperwork that I have been filling out. It is a lot of hassle, and then you will get a chance to get that boon for playing. Now, how the distribution works changes from location to location to location, but the general rule of thumb is anytime you show up to play a sanctioned event that has support program, there is a 1 in 10 chance that you will snag a boon. And for Starfinder, those boons...
All the banging.
And for Starfinder, one of those boons are going to be, at least for the start, the race boons, according to Tanya Worldridge and Thirsty on the Paso forums. Which means Space Dwarves!
Now, Space Dwarfs is fun to yell, but as a Starfinder player, is this something that really interests you?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Race boons always interest everybody. It's like the most popular boon. It's the one everybody talks about. They're the ones with the stupidly high charity bids for those very unique ones. Like when Android was auctioned off and it was over $1,000 during Gen Con to get that one Android boon for Pathfinder, which of course Starfinder players don't need to do at all. It's a standard core race. But, and also, there's a legacy of Pathfinder play I want to be able to also tie back into and enjoy with Starfinder, and the ability to play a space halfling or a space dwarf, or I'm inserting space in front of everything just because it's fun. But if I want to play a halfling, a dwarf, or a gnome, I mean, that would just be really neat. Especially besides the fact that it's something special and we have that, this is something you have that you had to work for, or you had to try for, or you got lucked into. But it's something special that you have that makes those characters more unique, more endearing, and also it has a sentimental value. And goodness knows how many freaking halflings I've played over the years. I mean, I'll get to play a halfling in a robot suit.
I did not consider the potential to play Starkercast, the distant relative of Karkercast, if I were to get my hands on a Gnome Legacy boon. So, all right, I am sold. I get exactly why people are excited for this.
Yeah. And there's also been a history in this program, this is a bit of a tieback, that the race boons were not traditionally what was offered as part of this regional support program. The GM side of things got really nice boons and race boons, but the player side were less enthusiastic. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know one way or the other the quality of those boons, but I do know that they weren't race boons, and there was some dissatisfaction with that the player earned ones weren't quite up to the same level. But this one, it does sound like the player boons, like I can't authoritatively say these aren't out yet, but it does sound by the quotes that they have that the player boons this time will be race boons.
Now, Param, the Legacy chapter, or the Legacy Race chapter, is in the back of the Starfinder core rulebook.
Yes, it is.
By the time people have been getting to the back of their Starfinder core rulebook, there have been some issues.
Yeah, they hope they still have a back of the Starfinder core rulebook, right?
Yes, unfortunately, there have been a higher than usual occurrence of spine damage to the Starfinder books.
Yeah.
There's a lot of possibilities. My suspicion is that they went with a new printer because they could get a larger order, like they could test out a new printer with a larger order and get a good price. And unfortunately, it looks like they may not. Such a gamble, or this is all speculation, may not have paid off. It's also possible they went with a familiar printer and it was just such a large order that maybe the printer skimmed on it. We don't know. There's a lot of stuff that goes on between here and China, including there was some boats that got caught because a distributor suddenly shut down. Or not a distributor, but an exporter suddenly shut down last year. Probably wouldn't affect Starfinder, but it's such a gamble when you were working with overseas printers that for whatever reason, even though Pathfinder books has not had this problem since the original printing of the core rulebook, the Starfinder core rulebook has unfortunately that same legacy.
Yeah, this isn't even as bad as this. The core rulebook wasn't as bad as this. The core rulebook was falling apart eventually, but the saddle stitching at least stuck to the pages in that case. It just wasn't sticking to the the problem with the original binding was that the saddle stitching was coming away from the book. In this case, the pages are coming loose from the saddle stitching, which is a much more severe form of damage. It's much less repairable. It is repairable. Any decent bookbinder can fix this for you if you have one in your neighborhood. That's not a free service. And it is self-repairable. As a person who has been trained at bookbinding, this is not the worst thing in the world to repair as long as you fix it early. And when it happens, you want to get some acid-free bookbinding glue, because you need that, and you're going to want to get something long and thin to apply it with, such as a kitchen skewer. Wooden kitchen skewers are good for this. And you want to be very, very careful as you re-glue the backs of your pages and then apply the spine stitching back to it. And it's involved. There's some YouTube tutorials. I'd watch them. But this is something you shouldn't have to do. This is something that no consumer should be expected to do. There are also some books that have been upside down. That's getting
have there been?
Yeah,
I did not hear about those.
It was especially prevalent in the character folios. They were upside down, a lot of them. But every single Starfinder core rulebook that I've seen in the wild that is in use has this problem. Mine has not developed the problem yet, because I have been exceptionally ginger to it. And I would not be this ginger to it if I was unaware of this problem.
Now, luckily, people don't have to put up with this problem. Vic Wirtz, Chief Technical Officer at Paizo, has said that the printer agrees the defect rate appears higher than their tolerances allow. So what this means, usually when a printer sends you your order, there will be an overage, as in they will send you more books than your order than what you ordered, and then all of that plus a certain percentage of what you ordered. If there's any problems with it, then it's just this stuff happens. They're above their tolerance, which means that there was actually something wrong with this print run, and so they, as in the printer, are going to ensure that Paizo's replacement efforts are more than covered. So if you have a problem with your book, don't hesitate to get it corrected. So contact Paizo customer service, and they will tell you what to do from there.
And we hope you all have good luck getting your books replaced and or repaired, whichever option you wish to go to. Though I have seen several people taking advantage of this when they go to their book binders and then getting some swanky new bindings. So if you choose to go that direction, let us know. We would love to see the pictures.
Swanky binding.
Yeah,
there's
like
one
customs.
There's something else that Vic Wirtz was talking about regarding the Starfinder printing, and that is a reprint.
Mm-hmm.
So
there's
a lot of talk about waiting for the reprint, because reprint will contain errata.
Mm-hmm.
This one won't, exactly. So that is true when it's something like the Pathfinder Core Rulebook and they're going from their 4th printing to the 5th printing, because the rate at which they will sell through their books will be slow enough that they will build up new feedback and be able to apply new errata to the file, which they will then send an updated file, properly paginated so that it looks as close to the last printing as possible. It'll just say 5th edition, 5th printing, whatever, inside the credits page. For Starfinder, it sold out so quickly that they aren't going to be making those changes before they do a 2nd printing. It's just they don't know, like they haven't field tested issues long enough to know if it warrants a change. And so if you are someone that is at a gaming store and you've got the opportunity to buy the Starfinder today, don't wait for the 2nd printing expecting a 2nd printing to be a better, text-wise to be better. It may have a better quality binding, but as we've already mentioned, if you've got a binding problem, you can get that replaced. So you should buy with confidence now, knowing that the next generation of people that are getting the copies of this Starfinder Core Rulebook are getting pretty much the exact same content.
There's a bit of a curiosity on that one that was explained, is that the new printing, even though it doesn't have an errata, will be marked as a 2nd printing. And Vic Wirtz has said that, has agreed with a poster that speculated that this was so that they could see if the new printing had the same defects as the old printing as they were examining the... this is a way for them to track, to make sure that the fix really is a fix.
Next up, we go to social media for a couple of intriguing posts from members of the Paizo staff. First of all, we've got Jason Bullman. Posted this to Twitter and his Facebook page, his author Facebook page. It says, what do you want out of Pathfinder? Is there a thing that you feel the game lacks? Says, I feel this is a question we don't bluntly ask often enough. Mm-hmm. And so he has just opened up the floodgates that if you have an idea for Pathfinder, what do you want in there? What do you feel it needs?
I believe that the Pathfinder needs the Pathfinder Almanac that James Jacobs talked about last time he was on here. Please, to goodness, publish that book!
All right, we're going to talk about the Pathfinder Almanac in a minute, but I think that this is an intriguing enough question from Jason Bullman that we should kind of dwell on it, and I have a feeling that chat will have their suggestions as well. And by the way, chat, if you do have suggestions, don't just share them with us. Find Jason Bullman on Twitter and on Facebook, and also share it there. Yep. But my friend Will is the one who brought this to my attention, and his immediate idea was themes. He really likes themes from Starfinder. He thinks there's room for themes in Pathfinder, and we do have archetypes which are kind of themed, but I still think that there's room separate from your class and your race to define what kind of character you are.
I think that would work good, but I don't want to dwell on things they can steal from Starfinder, because that's a whole topic on its own that I'd love to have some time with you, Ryan, because I'm loving me some Starfinder, and that's probably a given at this point. But I want to see Pathfinder's military options explained. I want the military book, and I want it to have a better mass combat system than they have. Most importantly, I want military-themed classes and class archetypes. I want to have a commander. I want to have the general. I want to have the military scouts. I want to have supply officers. I want to have siege mages. I mean, there's a bunch of areas of Pathfinder that are going to war. There's some areas that are basically primed the pump. I mean, basically we're all expecting Cheliax and Andoran to kick that thing off any moment. We need to have a better... As somebody who's grown up as a military brat, life in the military is a very different thing than civilian or adventuring life. Or I'm assuming as adventuring life, but because I haven't had an adventuring life myself. But... And the campaigns that are military focused are fundamentally different than a campaign that is a bunch of free roaming rebels free to do whatever they want. And I think that space has proven that it is a interesting space to explore, both in previous RPG material and in fantasy fiction and in... Oh my goodness, how many fantastic military novels and TV shows and movies are there? There's a lot of room to explore there, and I want to see more of it.
Branching off of that, I have a similar idea, and that is to explore scale more. So normally, you're always at the head-to-toe, full-body shot, 5-foot squares, like every space is a 5-foot square. And that's the most broadly applicable way to handle scale in the game, but sometimes you're just in a guy's office, and the guy's office should realistically be about 5 foot by 5 foot. And you're supposed to have a fight in there, so you either have to have this terribly inconvenient fight where everyone's outside in the hallway and you're taking turns beating up this guy behind his desk. I don't know why you're beating up this guy behind his desk, but if it happens. But like, why can't there also be the every square equals 1 foot and just call it like a skirmish scale? And then you've got your standard scale, and then you've got your army scale, and then you've got your planar scale if you want to have like every standard action affects a planet.
Oh man, I'm going to play Asmodeus. I'm going to move my demons into the next dimension.
I just think that it's like it's not that hard to implement, and if you've got enough generic maps, you can just mess with the scale and like have different options based on the scale you're at, so that you can hope to get really down and dirty, or you can even have slightly alternate character sheets based on your scale. So like if it's a military heavy campaign, then when you're leading troops, you use your zoomed out, your like 1 square equals 1 mile character sheet, and you've worked towards certain options there, and they're more about leading troops or making grand tactical movement across large swaths of land, whatever your specialty is. When you're at the standard scale, it's all about, the broadest application of your abilities. And then when you're at the skirmish scale, it's really about like the minutia of what you could be doing.
I mean, it's a good point. I mean, this game room that I'm in, it's a pretty decently sized game room, but if I were to map it on a Pathfinder battle map, it would be exactly 3 squares. And I regularly have 8+ people in here playing games.
Yeah, most rooms in my house are 1 or 2 squares, except the basement. But the basement is really crowded. So if I were to map out my basement, there would be no just 5-foot area of space where nothing's happening.
So we would have to, like, if I'm needing to roll initiative when I'm in Canada, we have to go downstairs first.
Yes. If you're going to challenge me to a duel, invite me to the basement. But the other thing is that, like, the way we're doing it now with 1 square equals 5 feet, it's like watching an entire movie at the same zoom in. Like, there's cinematography. There's times that you want to be further back from the action to look at things from a different perspective. So, like, from a storytelling angle, this would be something that would be really cool and would really add. Geez, I can't make everything. Everything I'm saying sounds like I'm trying to make a pun, but no, you're looking at it at a different angle and it adds another dimension, because messing with the scale can really influence how you tell the story. It's why Kingmaker has 2 different scales. There's already bits of this in there, but I feel like there's so much more that could be explored in the idea of, like, camera work and scale and messing with the zoom lens. And surprisingly, chat, you're not that chatty. I was expecting people, maybe you've all rushed off to find Jason Bellman's social media to share your suggestions there.
Which is terrible for our ratings. We should not encourage our audience to go somewhere else in the middle of an episode again.
I mean, they're still watching according to the numbers.
Tab doesn't count.
Oh, okay. Param, since you mentioned the Pathfinder Almanac, there is a little bit of Pathfinder Almanac news to talk about. Can you touch on what you mean by that?
Okay, so one of the books that was just announced is the Pathfinder Player Companion's Merchant Manifest, which of the things it's going to talk about is the trade, at the various trade aspects of places throughout Golarion. And that is one of the things that was a piece of information I desperately wanted to see in Pathfinder when we were interviewing James Jacobs, and he went on to talk about how one of the things he wanted to create for years is a book called the Inner Sea Almanac, which would be everyday life in Golarion and the weather patterns and how trade goods works and crops and all the various minutiae of how the world functions and people live, but doesn't necessarily have to do with dragon slaying and magic. I imagine magic would have a great deal to do in the Inner Sea Almanac, though, because magic is very important to life in Golarion. Now, this book hasn't happened, but it does appear that he has said on the forums that while that book still hasn't happened, this book here, The Merchant Manifest, is a way to get some of that information out there, at least in a little bit of a form. And yay! Yay! Something that we wanted to see happened shortly after we tried really hard to make it happen. I'm not saying we have anything to do with this, but hey, you know, timeline lines up. Either way, I'm glad James Jacobs is going to get some of this out there. I've been desperately hoping for more of that ever since the interview with him, and I'm hoping for more. I'm hoping that eventually he gets the green light to make this crazy thing happen. Heck, if Pathfinder wants to have a 5th Kickstarter, I'm all behind that if it makes this book happen. But only if it's for this book.
No, I've definitely looked at the it's called The Art of War, the Wayne Reynolds Pathfinder art book that Paizo published.
Oh,
this is something that came out of a few years ago? Do you remember? Did you just miss this? It's a hardcover book called The Art of War. I believe it's The Art of War because that's Wayne Reynolds' initials.
Reynolds. Yes, I'm aware of this book. It's a very nice book, but it's all pictures.
Okay, but I could see the Almanac having a similar purpose. Or actually, I guess maybe not. I was thinking the Almanac would be a coffee table book, but no, I guess it could be more just a handy reference book for people that are just vacationing in Golarion, which is effectively what we're doing, but with swords and spells.
If they want to go all out with like nice filigreed covers and make this thing look like a farmer's almanac, I'm all for that. I mean, that's just a bit more than I was even hoping for. But if this is going to be like some leather-bound hardcover with like hand inscribing and like oval pictures of wood cutout Galarian farmers and like the various celestial astrology symbols of Galarian up in the air, absolutely good going. I'm for it, but I don't think that this is quite that ambitious, even under its best circumstances. Now, it could be.
Just to follow up on that Jason Bullman story, on September 5th, Eric Mona went to the Starfinder group, I believe it's, Starfinder RPG group on Facebook, and he says, guys, I'm currently in a meeting about Starfinder reprints. Can you give me a sense of the availability at your local bookstore? So this has been a while ago now, and I have a feeling that meeting is over by now. But what's interesting is that this isn't the only time Eric Mona went to Facebook to do kind of a public shout-out and like interact with people while he was in a meeting. This coupled with the Jason Bullman recent post has me believe that Paizo is taking social media to try to crowdsource ideas and to interact with their fans in a different way. Because it's not like it's more direct, but it's more purposeful maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are not the kind of person that follows the individual creators from Paizo, maybe you just follow the Paizo page, I recommend seek out a couple of people that are really on the higher ups and start following them, because they might ask you a well-timed question that you might have the perfect answer for it, and you could be influencing future Paizo and Paizo products more than you have ever been able to in the past.
Now, next up is something that's not strictly Pathfinder or Starfinder related, but it is heavily of interest to both groups. Is right now, especially for Starfinder players who are looking for scenery and maps, because a lot of us have vast collections of fantasy material, and we'll probably want more. But we're also in sudden need for a bunch of sci-fi maps and material. A lot of 3D printing scenery has just sort of exploded over the last couple of years as 3D printing continues to get cheaper. I mean, I saw an ad for a printer for $100 the other day. I mean, that's getting pretty darn cheap for getting 3D printing. And one of the best uses for 3D printing? Game stuff.
It's
fact,
so true.
As far as I'm concerned, that's the only reason it exists. Who cares about prosthetic limbs for orphans? Let's get more Warhammer minis on the table.
I mean, when you put it like that.
But, as this has happened, two particular formats have sort of come to prominence. Fat Dragon Games was one of the earlier movers in this space, and one of them before that, they were really prevalent in the paper crafting 3D terrain. The do-it-yourself, download-it, papercraft stuff. And fair disclaimer, I used to work for Fat Dragon Games. I haven't in almost 10 years now, but I do have a bias.
Has it been that long?
Yeah.
Wow.
But I do have a bias. The company is really great guys, and they like to do favors, and they really work with the community, hence this next story. So they have their own proprietary format for the 3D stuff that is called Dragonlock. And they do allow other artists and companies to make Dragonlock compatible products and release them on DriveThruRPG. So if you want your 3D stuff to be compatible with Dragonlock, you can. While this was happening, there was another product being developed simultaneously on Thingiverse, which is like an open depository for 3D files you can go download, called Open Dungeon. And Open Dungeon was sort of, it's for free tile sets you could download. Now they needed a connecting solution, and one of the people responsible, Matt Barker, developed what was called the OpenLock format, which is another way of connecting the tiles together with these little tabs. Now this solution is very similar to each other, but there's patents involved in both directions. They're not directly compatible. You can't take a Dragonlock tab and plug it into an OpenLock slot. That just doesn't work. And then the other day, on one of the 3D gaming community Facebook pages, this came up. One of the users had a rant that there's another crew entering the field with even a third connecting solution. And as part of that rant, it came up that they weren't allowing a converter piece to be produced and hosted between Dragonlock and OpenLock, or OpenLock in this third format or whatever. And one of the creators, the creator of Fat Dragon Games, Tom Tullis, got up there and says, "Hey, we don't allow it because there's lots of legal issues with patents involved in both sides, and I don't want to host something that would be infringing on somebody else's work." And then somebody said, "Well, does that mean that you would work with the other companies to make it?" And he said, "Yep." And then Matt got on there and he said, "Yep." And then 3 days later, a converter was released. You can download it right now. I'll have a link in the show notes. It's over on Matt's side of things, but you can download it anytime. So you can take your Dragonlock pieces and your OpenLock pieces, and they can now forever live in harmony and connect together. All you need to do is print off some of these connector materials when you need to connect one to the other.
God, Param, the future is so now, isn't it?
It totally is. And I just saw Adam Savage on his his YouTube channel, showing how they took the PLA printed stuff and then put molten copper down into some silicone molds and then converted and just melts the plastic away, and then just dunk that in some water, and then what used to be this nice little plastic 3D printed thing is now a solid copper one.
That's cool.
Yeah, so man, can you imagine getting all your scenery done and then just boom, it's all metal now.
Can I try this at home, Param?
I mean, if you have an industrial strength forge and don't mind handling metal heated to several thousand degrees, go for it.
I don't, and I can't be trusted with glass furniture.
This is bad, then.
I'll get someone else to do it.
That's the best way.
That is really awesome, because one of the things that it can hold something like this back would be an arms race, or not an arms race, but a Blu-ray versus HD DVD style rivalry where just they have to keep undercutting each other until one of them just blinks and backs out of it. And ultimately, then we would lose somebody, a very creative person who could have contributed some really awesome materials to it. So by having this thing that allows them both to have their proprietary things, make sure that their items are still unique in some way, be compatible with each other's products, it's just expanding their audience instead of forcing their audience to choose one or the other.
And it is so encouraging to see this, because I remember when this went in the other direction back in the Papercraft days, where there was Tom and Fat Dragon Games, and they were very willing to work with people and be there was one time before I was working for Tom when I was running Rise of the Rune Lords, and I was like, oh, they're getting into a Thorn Maze, and darn it, I don't have a Thorn Maze 3D model that I can use. And then Tom made one and sent it to me that night, and I had one.
That night?
Yeah, that night. I printed it off the next day, we gamed with it, and it was great. He's a fantastic guy. He's a fantastic company. I will always recommend and support him, and his stuff is amazing, and it's also very cheap. Those combination of things is always great. But there was another company called WorldWorks Games that was also in the same space, and WorldWorks Games officially partnered with Paizo to produce the Pathfinder 3D scenery for a while. That lasted for 2 or 3 products. Anyway, WorldWorks Game is no longer in business, but they were not. There was the same issue where they wanted to have compatible links. Like, how do we make a thing for your system work with Fat Dragon system so we can connect everything and everybody be happy using everything? And WorldWorks Games was like, no, not happening. And then so forever there was this sort of bootleg community underground hush hush. Okay, can somebody get me a connector? Well, we can't talk too loud about the connectors. And unofficially, and I very much appreciated the existence of theoretical connectors that I may or may not have downloaded when I was using those products. But it's nice to see that that is not going to be the case here, because it definitely did make things a bad time back then, and it definitely made people into two different camps and limited this product, because like, ooh, they have great sewers and he has a great dungeon and this is a cool dwarf, but this is a really cool elf building and I can't use them together. And that was not fun.
Param, we've got a little bit of time for some banter, right?
A little bit. All
right, because I definitely wanted to touch on my first topic that I was proposing here. We'll probably save the other two, especially the second one. That one's pretty involved. But I always talk about how Pathfinder and tabletop role-playing games, it's a linear story, and that's why you can't always compare it to things like comics and other forms of fiction where you regularly have flashbacks, cutaways to other characters' perspectives. No, it's always playing in a single direction. It's always from the same perspective, like the same characters' perspectives, not counting characters that come and go for whatever reason. But we stumbled across an interesting alternative to that in this week's Hell's Rebels games. Okay. So I'm gonna set it up without spoiling things as much as I can. But Hell's Rebels is about forming a rebellion in Cheliax, specifically in Cantargo, against a member of the Thrune family, a noble who is just being completely unfair. So generally, to advance your rebellion, there's passive ways of advancing it, which is basically you go on an adventure, and that adventure harms Thrune in some way, or builds up your reputation as a rebellion, and so it just increases. Then there's the absolutely direct way, which is the rebellion phase, which is kind of like the king-making phase in Kingmaker, the kingdom-building phase in Kingmaker, where you are doing specific actions that take a week to perform and use up a different form of resource, and it does very specific mechanical advantages to your rebellion that then sometimes play out when you're back to playing your character rather than working together to play a rebellion. We had a section of the book that we're in, and I'm not going to say which one, again, to avoid spoilers, although if people are following along, they can probably figure it out, where you are trying to influence influencers. And so it is something that you're going to be playing on the character scale. And I guess this kind of lines up with what I was talking about earlier. So there's the character scale and the rebellion scale. You're going to be working on the character scale. You're going to be having one-on-one conversations with these characters. And there is one person who happens to be connected with each of these half-dozen influencers. And so we called a meeting with this one person, this ally of ours. And we had a meeting. We talked about the first person that we wanted to go and interact with, and they set up a meeting, which would be the next day. And so there was kind of like this pause where Jeff was trying to figure out what we do next. And I was like, Jeff, what if we kind of play this like a heist film, where this NPC that we're dealing with is kind of like the narrator explaining what's happening, and then we cut to a moment in the future where we have that exact scene that we just planned and talked about. And instead of then saying like we're having these constant reoccurring meetings with this one NPC, or instead of having the full meeting with the NPC and then going through each of those 6 or that half dozen plans, we make a plan, we cut to a different point in time where we're executing that plan, then we cut back, ignoring the success or failure of that plan. And I think it was specifically calling it like a heist film that really clicked with Jeff. And that's how we played out the rest of that session. And it was wonderful. It was all action focused. It was like we were totally engaged because we had just come up with that plan and we got to execute it right away without like the fizzly bits of having to deal with having a linear timeline interrupting or making us wait. And like the only minor interruption was that Corey wanted to do shopping to get some glamored armor, and we did that at the very beginning. And also we all bought like fancy outfits so that we can have these proper meetings, and that was it. Otherwise it was just like plan, execute, and it was so satisfying, and it played much more quickly than I'm used to. So I like, this is something that I just stumbled across. It's not something I've had in mind for a long time, but it is something that when I GM again, I am going to look for any opportunity to do this. Anytime it's like, if we do it as a straight line, this will be slow. If we break up the timeline somehow without having weird ramifications like a character dying and then cutting back and forth, whatever, as long as we can do like as little interference to speed up gameplay as much as possible, I am definitely going to keep this trick in mind for the future.
That works, and it's really cool, and it's a reason that they use that technique in heist films so often is because it makes things exciting, where otherwise I don't want to listen to here's the plan and then also see the plan. Nobody wants to do that. There's a reason that this exists in film. The only hitch in the road is the reason that RPGs are linear and so rarely deal with temporal type cutbacks and stuff. And that's because every player, from the moment that they finish their character sheet and grab their dice, becomes an unhinged agent of the Chaos Gods. And it will I could only do this with groups that I was so comfortable with, the fact that they would not engage in the worship of said Chaos Gods and take advantage of the fact that they can now screw with temporal reality, even in a meta way.
Yeah, so this happened to work perfectly because regardless of success or failure, as long as a fight didn't break out, which was unlikely in at least any of the scenarios we've gone through up to this point with these influencers, there was any success or failure wouldn't impact the interaction with the other influencers. And the other thing was that there was actually a certain amount of time that passes. And so, and Jeff was rolling it randomly. I assume he was running it as the book told him to. And so if it had been okay, you've got your plan for this meeting. 2 days pass before the meeting is scheduled. We don't want to rush forward because in Hell's Rebels, time is a factor. Mm-hmm. And so we don't want to feel like we're wasting time, that our characters could potentially be advancing the rebellion in another way. But had we played out those 2 days and then got back to the plan, it would have totally killed the momentum that we had just built up by making that plan. Some of my favorite second edition memories are not playing the game, but making plans while playing the game and then executing them. And this was the first time I really had a flashback to one of my favorite memories from second edition, playing Pathfinder.
Sweet. Now, what do you mean by this next note? Supposed
to. All right. This is a big kettle of fish. Are you ready to open it?
Sure. We've got fish. I mean, I don't like eating fish, but...
You don't like eating fish?
No, I can't stand seafood.
Oh, man. No, I could live off seafood. If I could live off seafood.
You can.
So,
pescatarians exist.
Well, then maybe I will pair them. But no, I won't. I like other fruit, too. So, there's something that I'm kind of picking up from the way Jeff is framing things, and this is just inference on my part about Hell's Rebels, so it's possible that it's not going that way, but at some point, we cleared out a bad guy's HQ, and the way Jeff refers to it, it definitely feels like he thinks we should move into this new building, even though from early on in the adventure, we kind of established another place that would be the base of operations so that we could do our secret planning and stuff. And in the most recent session, we've got a couple of prisoners in our original HQ, and he's like, have you transferred them over to the new location yet? And I was like, that new location is great, but our original location is home. We feel super comfortable there. This has just been when we're not thinking, when we're just saying we have a meeting, I think that's what we're all picturing, and most of the other players confirmed. So location A, we'll call it, the one that we've been at the longest, still has the prisoners and is the one that we're still considering our HQ. Now, it's possible that at some point in the adventure, the adventure assumes that we're supposed to move to the new HQ, and now something terrible might happen to the old HQ. Or there's other events that are supposed to happen, and they assume certain player behaviors. I was mostly an improv GM, and so I never figured out what was supposed to happen. It was always players are reacting to something the bad guys do, the bad guys now have to react to something the players do, and it was just a hopscotch like that. So there was never what was supposed to happen, whereas a pre-written adventure has 6 volumes that already exist before I even open up the first page. So you're a more experienced GM with canned adventures. How do you handle when there's something that's supposed to happen and it's just not happening?
Well, for the most part, the adventurers foresee the big ones of these if there's going to be any sort of hang-ups, and call that out. Hey, this is something we're making an assumption on happening. If this doesn't happen, make these adjustments. That phrase exists in every adventure I can think of somewhere. The adventurers try not... puzzle adventures are somewhat railroady in the way that all adventures have to be if you're going to start at level 1 and end at level 16 and have any assumption of what that content might be at that point. But they do try their best to not force big things, or at least to come up with excuses for the contingency. The key here is, for me, especially when I'm having to do this on my own, where my players take a big detour, is I look at the elements of the choice they didn't make that hopefully that they're not aware of, so they don't know that the underground sewer system entrance that is at this location B was there. And then I tried to come up with a way of rewriting the content so that the elements that are necessary for the adventure to function, they come about in another way. So like maybe they find out that there's a secret entrance to sewer entrance somewhere near location A that they uncover somewhere. Or that if it's important that they assault some building and take out some NPCs that they can't now because you're going to be constantly camping that section, well, maybe those NPCs get taken out when they're visiting their favorite tavern down the street, and there's another another favorite location that you guys have that you have sentimental attachments to gets burnt down if something like that has to happen. Basically, I just look at the reason that the supposed to exists and try to take those elements to reframe them, the hooks. I try to take the hooks and hook them into other things and rewrite that so that the damage is least from the players. And I try to do it in such a way that the players are unaware that the reality has shifted around them. I mean, I don't want Neo to notice the cat move twice.
I like it. And actually, it did remind me of one time that I suppose the players were just missing something that I had hinted at a couple of times, or I don't remember if it was an intention or just that as I was creating the world, something clicked within my head. So I was expecting it to click within the players' heads too, but they were like 10th level and just returning to the same city that they'd begun in. And so I made a big deal about them as celebrities and like NPCs that they kind of recognize now, all recognize them. And then they had to confront somebody subtly. And so they were on their way to this mission, and I was like, they have made no effort to disguise themselves. They are public figures at this point. And so I just had like a little girl come up and ask them to sign a wooden doll in their likeness. And somebody did, and then most of the party continued on, but one person in the party, I think it was Tina actually, just kind of clicked and was like, wait, no, they're going to know exactly who we are. This plan is doomed to fail right from the beginning because we don't have any disguises. And so they stopped, turned around, went to the nearest disguise shop, and bought
that's just
disguises.
a thing that exists in your world?
Disguise shops, sure,
Yeah.
in every corner.
Okay, good to know.
So yeah, it was what you said about the important elements. That really makes sense. That's what clicked to me.
Now, you've been hostile about this solution before every time I've offered it, such as when the players skip over vital clues or don't notice thing, or a session doesn't go to plan, and I've mentioned that, well, in this case, I take the clue and move it somewhere so that they have a chance to find it again. Yes.
But there, maybe in this case, because I had a specific circumstance in mind, it was changing my perspective on it. I guess it's just the fear of throwing the breadcrumbs at the players when they miss them the first time.
Oh, the players are incredibly dense creatures that barely notice that they exist in them. If I asked a freaking character who's playing a dwarf to point to his beard, most likely he would point at his character sheet.
Yes, fine, but still, like, I believe it's still a question of agency, and that I ultimately want it to be the player's decision. Or like in Rise of the Rune Lords, at one point there's supposed to be a character that kind of messes with them from the shadows, and he's got Dimension Door, and he's supposed to like pop in, mess with you while you're fighting something else, and then go off and like just. He's supposed to be a nuisance for an entire dungeon, and like in the first room that he shows up in. On the first attack, like one of my players made just a killer grapple check, then they just pounded him into unconsciousness with an incredible string of rolls. And it's like, I do believe they would have had fun with the idea of this heckling, like, sneak attacker, but I cannot deny them what they just earned, mostly through successful die rolls, but a couple of good tactical decisions. So in that case, it was like, what was supposed to happen was this guy was supposed to constantly get away, and I could have just GM fiated it and given him a few extra hit points or a bonus to his concentration check to get out of that grapple with the dimension door. But I didn't want to. I wanted to give it to them.
That same NPC just totally got one shot in my game too, so don't worry.
Yeah?
I just roll with it, man. Like, the key is you don't change the universe or steal from the players. First, you never steal from the players. I mean that figuratively. I mean literally steal from the players. Have the thief steal from the players.
I mean the player characters. Let's just make sure we're being specific there. You should not be stealing from the players.
I mean, I've got to pay for these replacement chairs somehow. I mean, they sit in them, they break them. It's kind of their own fault anyway. They're not going to miss the
steal a little bit from the players.
Yeah. But moving on, you don't want to steal the moments of glory from the players.
Yes.
But I totally support changing reality around them in ways they won't notice in order to keep the players from being unfairly frustrated. You want to support the suspension of reality and make the game world seem to move. And you want to make them seem clever, and you want to make yourself seem very smart. Sometimes you're not very smart, and sometimes they're not very clever. As the GM, you're the only one who has to know that.
We've got a comment from Todd. He's in chat. Hi, Todd. If the players skip over clues, give them extra shots to notice it later in a new context. If they're oblivious, let the consequences occur. And that's something I definitely agree in. If it's just something that it will be harder for them because they failed to get this thing, then it's harder for them. That's the bed that they've made.
I am cool with that as long as it becomes obvious to them that it's harder for them because we made this mistake. If my players
never notice.
If the players just think that you're being unfair and they're not having fun, then the game's not fun. And if any excuse of the game not being fun isn't worth it.
Yeah, I had too many campaigns in a row where the NPCs responded negatively to the PCs because the PCs were super presumptuous and really just expected certain reactions from the NPCs. And so, like, the PCs were constantly convinced that the NPCs hated them. And at one point, I just had to outline, like, you have done these things to these people and expect to be treated differently than they're treating you. You're jerks. The NPCs are treating you like jerks. And things went more smoothly after that. I take my NPCs' feelings very seriously.
I do not.
You do not?
No.
Oh, all right.
My NPCs are caricatures in which I uphold my players' egos, and they have a lot of lifting to do.
No, my NPCs are my universe.
No.
I have an empathic link with every NPC I play.
This might explain how you get all those voices so easily.
I really think I only have maybe... I was going to say 5. No, maybe I have 10 voices. I guess that's a lot of voices.
I still cannot do accents.
It's a gift that I stumbled across. I'm just happy to have it. Although it does remind me of an interview that I have to finalize. And I'll leave that as a Todd Stewart style tease that people won't know any more information about.
Do we have any more banter to go over, or should we wrap things up?
So I do have this one last point, and it's something that we've probably talked about a little bit enough that we could talk about it quickly. Mm-hmm. So I continue to play Doreen, my Oracle of Bones.
Right.
And I really enjoy her. So the original concept was that she was going to be very much like Raven from Teen Titans, at least how she was portrayed on the cartoon. Mm-hmm. So like monotone, grovelly voice and like pretty blunt. So it's like, you know, just my brother died in a fire and now I have to carry his bones with me everywhere I go. And it's a burden that I literally have to bear. But it's all right because sometimes he can be helpful. And it's like just like saying weird stuff in the like flattest tone that just throws people off. And it's been a lot of fun playing that aspect of her. a weird side effect is that she has an incredibly high charisma, being an oracle, and this being a really diplomatic campaign, she also has really high diplomacy. So it's fun watching Jeff justify how, when she says something weird but says it diplomatically, how the other NPCs have to just be like, yeah, okay, I guess I get that.
Well, you need to weaponize creepy.
Yes, but like a weapon for peace. So that's been great. And she's also got a really useful spell called Ears of the City. It's from Heroes of the Streets. Oh, is it Ears of the Streets? Anyway, it's Ears of something, and it basically lets you gather rumors really quickly. So you would get 1d4 hours worth of rumors every round for the duration of the spell, and you get them for rounds per level. So like at this point, we're 7th or 8th level, so I get a day worth of rumor mongering just by making this spell, casting the spell, which is low enough that I can cast it multiple times. So I could spend a minute to get a week's worth of rumors.
Well, sounds like a fun character.
Until we get into combat.
Right.
And then I expressed concerns with not knowing how to play casters, and so you put together an entire Private Sanctuary episode about playing characters, and that's when I realized it's not that I don't know how to play casters, it's that I really was not interested in what makes a caster fun. And so a lot of the times it's standing back and just kind of just being even remotely useful to feel good about myself. But it really kind of struck home that mechanically I'm not connecting with this character a few sessions ago when there were some runes in a room, and I just checked out, because normally as the guy that plays the fighter, that kind of puzzle has nothing to do with me. And so the GM's describing the runes and then waits expectantly for, the players to interact with them, and then turns his attention directly towards me, and I'm just checked out, and it's like, oh no, this is my thing now. That's right, runes, eh? You're going to have to start from the beginning, Jeff. I really was not paying attention. Runes have nothing to do with me most of the time. And then he went over them, and there's certain puzzles that you need a certain understanding of, like the spells rules. You have to know what spells are out there. You have to know what you as a caster and what other casters can do to deal with these magical traps. And I do not have that system mastery. Spells are very much a blind spot of mine. And so he lays out, every element of this rune-based trap, this rune-based puzzles, actually. And I had nothing. And I basically had to then turn player to player to talk to Corey, who knows spells much better than I do. He told me as a player what I had to do, then I had to convey what Corey knew as a character. And it was just like, it felt very tedious, whereas that kind of thing for a certain type of player would have felt mystical and really like engaging, and it was just kind of a bummer because it's like I'm the one letting the party down by just playing a character outside of my comfort zone.
Well, I mean, this isn't the first time anybody's ever not liked their character.
It's not?
I mean,
no,
what I mean, it sounds like it's reaching the point right now where you're just checking. When you said the phrase where you said you checked out, that sort of told me everything I needed to hear. You're not liking this character. You're not having fun with this character. It's time for this character to retire.
But I'm liking her character, and I don't want another character that's mechanically different but the same personality to show up. And that's my big problem. Plus,
well,
there's only two members of the original party. There's only two members of the original party still alive that formed the rebellion to begin with. So if I just left, it would be a real jerk move for my character to make.
Well, I mean, I never said you left peacefully.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, rebellion stories are tragic. Haven't you ever watched Les Mis?
I have.
Yeah, that's got a very, very low survival rate. Now, let's talk about the other option, because there is another option. Pathfinder even has it mechanically legal. You can heavily... This character can clock out for a couple of weeks and spend a lot of gold, or get GM permission to handwave this, and retrain this character into some stats you would like playing. An immediate thing is, like, right now you're playing an Oracle, right?
Yes, Oracle of Bones.
Yeah, I could see this character being rebuilt fairly successfully and keeping most of the flavor into something like a War Priest.
So, one thing I didn't remind you is that we rolled for stats, and I've got a couple of really good stats and a couple of real stinkers. I have an 8 strength and I believe a 10 con.
What's your dex?
Okay, I think it's like 12.
All right, so you have your options that are available to you, and you have reality. And you need to concile where you're willing to make your compromise.
I so far have been compromising in losing out the fun in combat and certain other situations, because there is a lot of role-playing in Hell's Rebels, and I really enjoy role-playing the character. So it's just such a weird experience to check out during combat and just to hope everyone else does the best they can. I used, I believe it was Alex that recommended the feat. I forget the name, but it's combat advice. Combat advice from the ranged combat, ranged combat toolbox. Is that the name of the book?
Yes.
That's super useful, and it does allow me to say something creepy and weird in the context of combat, and it's just like the weirdest advice. So I am bringing what I like about this character into the areas that I don't like the character, but it also feels like I am not contributing to the best of my ability.
Okay, I have another suggestion for you. You're playing
Go
an
for it.
Oracle, right?
Yes.
And you're more comfortable in a melee format, right?
Normally, yes.
Okay. Invest in the summon monster spells. That way you can summon up a melee creature and get your melee on.
Yeah, that's actually really good advice. Because usually when I get a new spell, I have trouble narrowing it down. Because there's still a lot of spells that make me useful in my other roles in the campaign. But really, Ears of the City is the one that does the majority of my non-combat, that I cast the majority of the time. So I think I can spare a spell slot for a combat-heavy spell, and I can even flavor it as...
If it's going to be a summon, make sure that I would learn 2 of them, of your 2 highest level slots, because the summons fall behind quickly in effectiveness.
Well, we have a rogue, so even just setting up flanks with a summoned creature, I will feel like I'm contributing.
I think you won't feel satisfied if you're just throwing something that dies in a hit out on the field, especially since what you've expressed to me about feeling useless. But yeah, I mean, throwing down some of the top-end summon monsters, I mean, you can actively contribute. Plus, looking at that list of monsters will open up some tactic options that you might not be aware of. For instance, one of the favorite ones I have is that you can start casting a lot of cleric spells as a wizard just by summoning critters that can cast them. Yeah. So sometimes I need heal. Summon Monster 5. Heal him!
Now, bones are really my thing. Is there a version of Summon Monster that's just summon undead? Not create undead.
Literally summon undead.
Summon undead? Is that really a thing? I honestly do not know the spells that well, Taram.
Yeah,
Core rulebook?
Yes.
I'm on the PRD right now.
Also look at Bard 1B's recommending the Summoner's Handbook, which you probably should look at too.
I don't think I own that yet, but that's... Alright, let me get a summon spell first, make sure that this is the solution, and then, I will start looking at...
But maybe you want to summon a Bone Devil.
I do want to summon a Bone Devil. Because it doesn't have to be undead, it just has to be bones.
Oh, and
that's my thing.
Bard 1B's coming to rescue, the Skeletal Summoning Feat.
That's a feat? I have never heard of this feat. I keep this advice coming. I am looking this up right now because I believe...
Make sure you take the Augmented Summoning Feat too, so your monsters survive. It beefs them up. It's worth it.
Okay.
And then you have some combat options. You have a lot of combat options you can throw out the field. Summoning is not just for the summoner.
Add human skeleton to the list of creatures you can summon with Summon Monster 1. Oh, this is awesome. So, what really... Oh, spell focus necromancy. Alright, well, I'll think about it. What's great about this is that anytime I do anything bone-related, I just say... Or spirit-related, too, because I've got... Mage Hand and some stuff, I credit my dead brother Rupert for being the guy. So when I cast my bone armor as an Oracle of Bones, I just say that I am wrapping Rupert's ribcage around me and wearing his femur as a helmet. And when I summon my skeletal companion who the rules are vague, and I feel like I'm abusing them by making inferences into how that ability works. But yeah, it's always Rupert that I'm summoning. So this actually lets me summon a more powerful and more varied version of Rupert, which that was one of the gimmicks that I conceived of for the character right from the beginning, and I don't feel like it played out very well. So, oh yeah, Skeleton Summoner really feels like something I'm going to have to invest in, even though it means I have to wait a couple of feats because I don't have spell focus necromancy.
Well, this is where the retraining rules become a lot more viable. Retraining feats is cheap and fast.
Yeah, you know what? I've got a feat from first level that I got from the Inner Sea World Guide, which is something like when you're in a crowd, you get a +1 bonus if you're adjacent to 2 allies, like bonus to your AC and reflex. And there's a couple of other things that has actually paid off early on in the campaign, but I have not really gotten anything out of it in a while. So it's worth retraining out of that. All right, Param, you have given me direction. And chat. Thank you, chat.
No, that's because I know it.
Ah, that's the name of the show.
All right, but it's getting late. So now that
Yes.
your character is well and truly on their way to being combat effective,
I'm still taking some notes, but yes.
I think it's time that we move on to wrap-ups and shoutouts. And we're back.
Thank you for joining us for episode 165 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. And special thanks to our guest, Todd Stewart, who was a blast and gave us really interesting insight into how someone so normal can create things that are just so creepy. Before we go, we want to bring your attention to some things that we thought were cool and hope you think are cool too. First of all, member of the network, Monica Marlowe, and former RPG Super... Well, not former RPG Superstar. That's a title that she gets to keep for the rest of her life. So RPG Superstar, Monica Marlowe, is running a charity event where she is running Captive in Crystal, which is the Pathfinder Society scenario that she wrote. You can buy into a spot at her table, and this is all to raise money for the Southern Poverty Law Center. If you check out... Let me just make sure I get the name of the event right. Pathfinder-Captive in Crystal. Yeah, you can find it on Facebook, and it is an event. It tells you the date, which is this Saturday from 3 until, the scenario ends. It's going to be played on Roll20, so you don't have to be anywhere near Monica to be able to play in this game. And it's for a good cause. It's with a talented GM, a talented creative writer, running the adventure that she wrote. So I highly recommend that if you have the time, if you're looking for something to do this weekend, you throw some money towards a good cause. Next up, I believe we have we'll skip that one. So another charity event that I want to bring some attention to is a little further in the future, but it's Team Zodpodge. Mm-hmm. And last year they raised over $5,000 for the Seattle Children's Hospital with a special event with Paizo staff, and there were Paizo prizes that were raffled off, including Param, your whole. Oh, actually, no, it wasn't the core rulebook. It was a gold foil bestiary.
I know.
Yes.
I still want one. I will never, ever, ever get one of these. I've consigned myself to this. I'm very glad for the good they bring when they do come up on the auction market, but I'm always very quickly outbid.
Well, once again, they're raising money for the Seattle Children's Hospital, and this year their goal is $10,000. And the early rumors are that they might be getting a gold foil Starfinder core rulebook. I know, Parent, but
it's my white whale, Ryan. It's my white whale.
Your white whale is procreating. There's white whales all over the place now.
What the heck is going wrong with these whales?
Moby Dick 2. Moby Dicker? I don't know.
We know how this ends, don't we? We've all read the book.
Well, in addition to them raffling off the Starfinder swag that I can't even bear to repeat because I know what it'll do to Param, there will also be boons. And last year, the boons were said to be better than the ones at Gen Con.
Wow.
So just to give you an idea. It's, again, a charity event you can contribute to online, and then they play over Twitch. And so you can watch them. And Jason Bowman specifically last year, if you contributed to his portion of the Team Zodgepodge, then you could write his character that he was forced to play. And I forget the first name of the character that I wrote for him, but the last name was Buttsworth, and I plan on donating again this year. Oh, there we go. There's the character sheet on my desktop still. Oh, yeah, Pulsey Buttsworth. Pulsey because his pulse is so strong because I built him to survive. I maxed out Constitution. Like, every option I took was to make this character just live. Like, he had no offensive capability. He was just there to survive. He died.
No.
I know. But he won't be the last of the Buttsworth line, Param. I can tell you that much.
No. Right now, there needs to be a lot more good causes in the world.
There needs to be more good causes in the world?
Absolutely, man. The world is on fire and falling apart. Literally. We need more doing good. So support these efforts, guys. Get out there and do what you can. And if you guys know of any other gaming related charities that we'd be interested in, make sure you let us know so we can help boost the signal as we can.
Yeah, I hope to have somebody from Team Zodgepodge, one of the organizers of the charity event, on the show so that we could specifically talk about how you can organize a charity event, how you can get Paizo to help out and possibly send really cool support material that will make some people on this network extremely jealous. Mm-hmm. I mean, most people on this network will be a certain degree of jealous.
Right.
But certain members of the network will be extremely jealous.
Just me and Lewis, right?
Param, do you want to talk about what happened on the network this week?
No.
Okay. Well, do you want to remind people what happens on the network?
Yes, every week we put out some of the best material for Pathfinder and now I guess Starfinder. I can say that out loud because it's true. Yeah.
I want to go back and start tagging things Pathfinder versus Starfinder just to make it easier to find specific material. But there's a lot of stuff that would need to be tagged.
Oh my goodness. You don't know until you dig into the database, and I'm in there almost daily at this point. And we put out a massive amount of material. So if you're just listening to the podcast, you're only getting half of the awesome stuff that No Direction puts out. Because we have a team of some of the best writers in Pathfinder putting out content for us every single day. Well, most of the time, every single day. So go check us out at noduration.podcast.com, where you can read blogs from the likes of Luis Loza, James Ballard, Alexander Agunas, Ryan Costello, you do your own blog stuff, Anthony Lee, both Monica and Andrew Marlowe, and and Lauren!
Can I just give a little bit of a shout out to my own blog this week?
Absolutely! Shout it out!
All right, keyword design. So people that are familiar, keyword design, you make a suggestion, a single word, and I have to make a mundane item, a magic item, a feat, a spell, and a class option based on that one word. And this week's word was child. Mm-hmm. And I am super proud of what I came up with for feats, which was not just a feat, but a new category of feat called novice feats. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that you get a bonus, which is usually 5 minus your character level. Mm-hmm. And so it's gives you a great bonus at the beginning, and by 5th level it will not give you a bonus anymore, and so you retrain out of it. It's to give you a little beginner's luck, or to give you the fresh out of a textbook bonus that you get when you're fresh out of school. Mm-hmm. And I am super proud of this because I often complain about problems with first level characters not being able to do what you want them to be able to do. Like, you are penalized for just not having the bonus that you need for that. And so I feel like this helps low-level characters survive without taking away from being a higher-level character, and at the same time, introduces the retraining rules to new players earlier on. I'm really proud of myself. When I came up with it, I was like, this is something that I wish was in the core rulebook, and everyone had access to this.
It sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, there's other cool stuff in here. The Imagination Summoner is a summoner where an adult and a child counterpart, and one of them is imagining the other one, and it's not clear which one is real.
Oh, that's just creepy.
Only as creepy as children are in general. So I've been going through the same people's suggestions, so if you would like to just throw a word at me, I am more than happy to take new suggestions from new sources. Not that I don't still have a steady supply of words that I can call from, but if you've got an idea that you think would really challenge me, or it's just an aspect of the game you'd like to see more options dedicated to, let me know. So, Param, how can people get in touch with us?
They can reach us at nodirection@hotmail.com. They can go to nodirectionpodcast.com and reach us there. Also, facebook.com/nodirection. And, of course, if you're listening to this live, you know you can find us at twitch.tv/nodirection.
And until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.